questions from Nigerians with regard to President Buhari's second term in office, which began yesterday. And of course, a broad range of areas were discussed in our first segment of the conversation yesterday. This, of course, will deal with the president's team, intergovernmental relations, and matters that should be on the front burner at all times, including, of course, the three items that the president first outlined in his first term, namely economy, tackling insecurity, and more importantly, dealing with corruption.
While some of the guests called for mutual cooperation between the executive and legislature, others want the power of the Nigerian state directed towards the welfare of the citizens.
That's right, Jumai, and of course some Nigerians have continued, as it were, to agitate for more, while others would appear to be appreciative of the efforts that have been made so far.
And the expectations of Nigerians, Kingsley, still remain high. Now, as the new government settles down to business, the thinking of many is that the administration would consolidate on achievements of the last 4 years and re-strategize on others.
Well, a number of questions we are going to raise later on in our conversation segment. That's to say, from our new set of guests, what should Nigerians look forward to in another 4 years? What will be the priority areas and what should be the pace of the administration?
So, this morning we shall continue with our discussion on the expectations of Nigerians of President Buhari's next level and Nigerians in for a better deal with the next level. What do they hope to see and how are they ready to contribute? Are there sacrifices to be made? What caliber of people will form the kind of cabinet Nigerians expect? What will be the targets of the new public officers?
Very pertinent questions you have raised there, Jubai. Of course, as we indicated, our guests will deal with those issues once we get into our chat segments. Thank you for being with us on Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live, as it were, on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. My name is Kingsley Osadolo.
And I am Jumwa Yusuf. It's always good to have you join us on Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA. We are live in Abuja. As always, the complimentary part of the program shall be brought to you, including newspaper review, business, sports, foreign and entertainment news. But first, the news with Musbao and Wahab. Good morning, Musbao.
Yeah, just before Musbao comes on, Jumai, I'm wondering, just before Musbao comes on, I'm sure those who had the privilege of watching the match yesterday would have witnessed how Chelsea silenced the Gunners in humiliating fashion to win the Europa Cup. Musbao is also, of course, a sports correspondent and a sports enthusiast.
Kingsley, you're breaking my heart. I'm an Arsenal fan, a Gunner for life.
Well, it's unfortunate that happened, 4-1. Pretty humiliating. Musbao.
Well, that was actually the case. Sorry about that, Jumai. The Gunners did not get their guns at hand, and they did not foresee this one, like someone said. All right, welcome to Venice. President Muhammadu Buhari has formally begun a second full term of office following a swearing-in by the acting Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Ibrahim Tanko Muhammad.
I, Muhammadu Buhari, I will protect all manner of people according to law.
And Vice President Yemi Osinbajo says he will continue to serve the people of the country with the best of his ability towards ensuring a greater Nigeria.
That I will not allow
my personal interest
to influence
my official conduct,
my official
decisions, that I will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution
and defend the Constitution
of the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Professor Osinbajo there swearing in for a second term in office as the Vice President of Nigeria. Well, from that, the Forum of Presidential Candidates and Political Parties for Good Governance has congratulated President Muhammadu Buhari for his inauguration for a second term in office. A statement by the chairman of the forum, Shitu Kabir Mohammed, stated that the landmark achievements of the president in the last 4 years earned him the second term in office. 29 state governors across Nigeria have taken the oath of office, which is in line with the 1999 constitution for a 4-year term in office.
And bear true allegiance
to the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Separately, the governors pledged to respect the rule of law, provide social intervention programs, and execute policies that will impact the lives of masses.
Lives and property of its citizens will not be negotiated or compromised.
Government will embark on civil service reforms that will ensure a well-trained, well-resourced, well-equipped.
Will not leave anyone behind. No matter your political affiliation, will make no work for you.
Away from inaugurations now, President Muhammadu Buhari departs Abuja this Thursday, May 30th, to attend the summit of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, OIC, in Mecca, Saudi Arabia. A statement from the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Media and Publicity, Garuba Shehu, said the 14th session of the Summit Conference of the OIC, scheduled to hold on Friday, May 31st, will be hosted by King Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud and attended by heads of state and government of member states. According to the OIC Secretariat, the summit, to be convened under the theme Makkah Al-Mukarramah Summit, hand in hand towards the future, seeks to develop a unified stance on events in the Islamic world. President Buhari is expected to address the forum and underscore the need for member countries to unite and work together to combat common challenges such as terrorism and violent extremism. The president will also push forward themes that have been at the forefront of his domestic and international priorities, including reviving the Lake Chad Basin, investing in Nigeria to create jobs, and financing the development of the country. President Buhari, who is expected to return to the country on the 2nd of June, will be accompanied by some dignitaries. President Buhari becomes the third Nigerian leader to attend the OIC conference in person after late Umaru Musa Yar'Adua and Jonathan Goodluck Jonathan. That's the news beats on Good Morning Nigeria for this morning. We'll bring you more news subsequently in the course of the day. The program continues shortly with Kingsley and Jumai.
All right, now it's time for us to take some business stories with micro, small, and medium-scale enterprises set to get more attention in President Buhari's second term, just as Nigerian accountants have offered recommendations to boost transparency and accountability in government business. Our correspondent, Joy Uzo, has the details of the stories.
It's good to have you join us on Business News. Earlier this week at a stakeholders meeting on job creation organized by the Industrial Training Fund, the federal government disclosed its plans to provide 20 million jobs to reduce unemployment in this second tenure of President Muhammadu Buhari. Worthy of note is also plans to ensure that micro, small and medium-scale enterprises access funds easily through a scheme that will be launched by the federal government in no distant time. Special Assistant to the Vice President on MSMEs, Tola Johnson, who shared the plans with Business News, assured that Nigerian businesses will have a reason to smile in this next level.
We have different schemes, but it's just that some of those tenures are not good for the SMEs. I mean, an SME cannot collect money in January and you're expecting to return that money back in December. So they want a scheme that will last. Say, for instance, 7-year scheme, and then single-digit interest rates as well. So all these have been put together. And I want to assure you that in the spirit of this next level, Nigerians will smile by the time His Excellency comes up with the outcome.
And to the federal government's fight against corruption, Association of National Accountants of Nigeria, ANAN, has pledged to be partners in progress in the second term of President Buhari. In view of this, the association advised government to embrace internal central mechanism, market survey and timely reporting of government activities as part of mechanisms to ensure more transparency in government transactions.
That is why you have a situation where people are able to take away the money without necessarily being noticed. But if you have this in place, definitely you will not have that kind of problem. But with the coming of the TSA, it has reduced it significantly. But it can be better.
With these in place, Annan assured of a more transparent tenure that will curb resource mismanagement and fast-track economic growth. With that, we wrap business news. I'm Joy Uzo saying thank you for your time.
Thank you, Joy Uzo. Newspaper Review is next on Good Morning Nigeria.
Our newspaper reviewer, Bayo Atebe, is with us in the studios this morning. As always, Bayo, good morning and welcome.
Thank you. Did you catch the inauguration fever yesterday? Good morning, Kinsley. Good morning. Good morning.
Yes, in 29 states of the Federation, and of course here in the Federal Capital Territory. Those are the stories that we have as the lead for the papers that we have this morning. We have 5 papers, I believe. Let's begin with Jume?
Yes.
The Daily Independent.
Yeah, we'll begin with the Daily Independent. And just before the under the masthead, we have apprehension. Hope greets Buhari's second term kickoff with a rider. PDP, Afenifere criticizes absence of speech at inauguration. You'll find that on page 4. And then the picture message, they are all on the inauguration, from the president's inauguration to state governors across the country. And at the bottom plate of the Daily Independent, Obasanjo, 392 orders aboard Ethiopian Airlines escape crash. You find that on page 4. Oyo new governor to contribute salary for teachers' welfare. That's on page 5. Kisley.
All right. Now, Leadership newspaper has as its lead story the inauguration. High expectations as President Muhammadu Buhari and governors begin new mandate. That story is on page 4 in greater detail, with a rider present off to Mecca for OIC Summit. And on the front page there of the Leadership newspaper, you can see a montage of photographs from various scenes across the country where inauguration ceremonies took place for the president and 29 governors and their deputies. That's Leadership on the inauguration stories. We'll go to Daily Sun now, and Daily Sun also has it as his lead story. It says, Buhari stuns all with no speech inauguration. And 3 riders takes oath of office without usual acceptance speech. I don't think that's, you don't give an acceptance speech during inauguration. You give an acceptance speech after you have won an election. All right, so rider says, second rider says, President expected to speak on June 12, and he and APC overburdened by guilt. That's another rider, and it's attributed to the PDP. And the other headlines there says, Governors El Rufai, Wike, Sanwo-Olu, Ihedioha, Okowa, and others unveil agenda. Those stories are inside the paper. There are other headlines there on the front page. Let me just go through them quickly. Bio, you have an earpiece beside the nameplate of the Daily Sun newspaper. It says 393 air passengers in misapproach landing at Lagos Airport. And with the rider, Ethiopian Airlines plane aborts landing for missing runway alignment. That's on page 4. Also there on the front page of the paper, Biafra. So tension in Southeast over sit at home. Army and police mount checkpoints, and IPOB members lock down Abakaliki and other cities. Ohaneze, ADF differ on event. APC slams group over Akpabio, that's page 42. And Melaye to deliver keynote address at Jesse Jackson's event in the US. That's on page 44. Bayo.
Thank you, Kinsley. President Muhammadu Buhari and Vice President Yemi Osinbajo, flanked by their spouses, took the oath of allegiance and oath of office to mark the inauguration of their second term yesterday. The acting Chief Justice of Nigeria, Ibrahim Tanko Muhammad, administered the oath of office. There were those who expected an inaugural address like "I belong to all and to no one," and they were disappointed. This was because the inauguration was meant to be low-key, and if there's going to be any inaugural address, it will come on June 12th. There was handover. There's, however, a colorful parade by the armed forces and the police. Across the state, 29 governors also were sworn in. 20 of them won re-election. The new ones were 9. However, one of them, Amadu Fintri, had a stint as an acting governor before this advent. In Lagos, Governor Sanwo-Olu proclaimed he is friend, brother, neighbor, and servant to all. And he called on all to join to script and fashion Lagos. Across in Ogun State, Governor Adedapo Abiodun promised equitable distribution of resources and transparency in government. Governor Seyi Makinde of Oyo State says he cannot pay 30,000 naira minimum wage. However, he revoked the 3,000 tuition fee that is being paid in the state, and he donated his salary to pensioners. In Imo, where Governor Emeka Ihedioha, donning his traditional trademark green cap, promised a transparent government. In Adamawa, Amadu Fintri promised to improve social and economic well-being of the people. In Maiduguri, Professor Babagana Zulum was also sworn in. While in Gombe, Governor Mohammed Inouye declared emergency in base infrastructure. He announced 3 critical issues. First, directed secretaries of the local government, 11 local government, to take charge. Third, he revoked all appointments and contracts made after 10th of March. Similarly, his brother counterpart in Bauchi, Senator Bala Mohammed, also announced that all appointments, promotions, transfers made the day he was declared governor are all now null and void. At Lafia, the soft-spoken, articulate governor, Al-Makura, was the only one who was around to hand over to the new governor, Abdullahi Sule. He promised to fulfill campaign promises and pursue equal development. At Damaturu, Governor Maybala Buni promised an all-inclusive government. In Kwara, where the Otoge revolution produced Abraman Abrazak, he said the motion of government will give highest priority to socio-economic development. In other words, he says, work begin, Isheya. And a week ago, he didn't even know he will be governor. Dr. Bello Mutawale, upon taking oath of office in Zamfara State, says he's seeking collaboration from all state actors to actualize his mandate. So it was a celebration gala across the nation for inauguration. Here is wishing all the governors successful tenure.
That's right. I mean, there were 2 incidents. I mean, one of them not too pleasant, but the other, of course, cause of a joke. The one out of Maiduguri in Borno, the governor, while delivering his inaugural address, was said to have been coughing repeatedly. Attempts to relieve him of that apparently were not successful. And so midway into the speech, he abandoned the speech, and then the ceremony came to an abrupt halt. There was a report that perhaps, a police officer had accidentally released some tear gas in and around the location. But you're a bit curious, why would he be the only one who was affected by the tear gas? So we do hope that he's fine and that he takes it up from there. I mean, just on the eve of the inauguration, there was also that unfortunate incident of a steward who committed suicide.
I think he should be fine because he later on saw off Governor former Shetima to the airport.
Yeah, and then which takes us to the next one. That's former Governor Amakura, who is now a senator-elect, by the way, of Nasarawa. Now, after he gave his farewell address and handed over to his successor, Abdullahi Sule, he then went to Lafia Airport, which was constructed under his 8-year administration. Now, the joke, of course, is that Lafia Airport is intended as a cargo airport. And the report was indicating that He was the one that took the maiden flight out of the airport. So where is the cargo and who is the cargo?
Quite interesting, actually. We're seeing a lot of interesting stories, and and governors coming out strong to say they're going to fight corruption, they're going to ensure that security is tackled, insecurity is tackled. I think it's a tall order for most of the governors.
There was this other one too. Following the expiration of the term of President Muhammadu Buhari and the Vice President at midnight of Tuesday, many people did not know that we did not have a president or a vice president. It was the Senate president who was to fill that void. And he reminded the vice president when he arrived at the inauguration that you guys, I am president now until you are sworn in. But the Senate president has also said that he has congratulated all Nigerians, particularly for 20 years of uninterrupted democracy, and he's wishing all successful in their tenures.
Okay, now let's move to the Daily Trust newspaper. Just below the masthead, no country is fighting graft like Nigeria, attributed to Ribado, governor of Kaduna State, Ribado from Adamawa State. That's on page 3. Trade dispute impacting air travels, attributed to IATA. And the huge bold headline is high expectations as Buhari begins second term, with a rider president off to Saudi Arabia absent at inaugural dinner. Bauchi Gombe governors cancel last-minute appointments. That's quite a tall order. And the picture message there all over the newspapers: President Muhammadu Buhari takes his oath of office for a second term with the acting Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Ibrahim Tanko Muhammad, in Abuja yesterday. With them is his wife, Aisha Buhari. At the bottom plate of the Daily Trust newspaper, Singapore frees Nigerian arrested over drugs. Quite interesting and, overwhelming there. And you find that on page 7. Plane conveying Obasanjo, 392 others in aborted landing. You find that on page 9. And bank CEO decry bad debtors smear campaign. That's on page 18.
Okay, let me take some other headlines also from the Leadership newspaper. And this is right at the foot of the front page of the paper. Below the montage of photographs from the inauguration ceremonies across the country yesterday. El-Rufai okays 6-month maternity leave for Kaduna workers. That should be women, by the way, not all workers. El-Rufai okays 6 months maternity leave for Kaduna workers, page 47. Singapore's Supreme Court frees Nigerian on death row. And shareholders kick over banks' 83.5 billion naira contributions to AMCON. And EFCC commends World Bank over stolen assets recovery, page 5. And just below the name flag of the Leadership newspaper, Obasanjo, 393 others aboard Ethiopian airline escaped death in Lagos. This story about sometimes the way we catch our stories involving air incidents, it's a bit alarming. I mean, since yesterday on the social media, you've had all kinds of alarming perspectives to the incident that happened in Lagos.
Yes, I think it's an alarm, and the alarm is not far-fetched because the airline was Ethiopian airline, and just some couple of months ago, we had the unfortunate incident of the Ethiopian airline being involved in an air crash. But actually what transpired, the pilot realized that he was to land on the 3rd touch line, and if he continued, he could overshoot the runway. Therefore, he aborted and then went on air again. And then he went around hovering in the atmosphere for about 20 minutes. And it was also raining, very heavy too, before eventually he landed. And you can imagine Nigerians being what we are. Everybody was alarmed. The Christians in the aircraft, some of them were busy banishing the devil. Others were busy splashing the blood of Jesus. The Muslims too were shouting, La ilaha illallah, calling on God to deliver them, as he delivered Zonul from the stomach of the fish. Deliver us from this aircraft. Eventually, the aircraft landed. Yes. We got to know all this because there was a journalist on the aircraft who gave this perspective. But surprisingly, when he went to find out, some of the persons in the air control towers saw it as a normal incident and there was nothing to be so alarmed about. It was one or two persons who confirmed that, yes, there was, if he had continued, he could have overshot the runway, and he noticed that, and it's a normal thing that occurs quite often in the airline. So we have to be very careful the way we alarm people. air travel is still one of the safest means of traveling.
That's right. Jumai and Bayo, I had seen at the Abuja airport, this was sometime in 1998 or so, about, July or August, very stormy that night. We were waiting for a flight out of Abuja to go to Lagos, and there was a presidential jet that was about to land. Everybody could see it. It was the old terminal building, which has now been converted and remodeled into the private aircraft wing. And it was touching down. And of course, at the moment of touching down, it took off again. And there was no report of saying, oh, whoever was on board the presidential jet, had escaped death. It is the way we couch it. Airplanes have landed on water. We had that in the US, and all the passengers survived. Some airplanes have crash landed, and all the passengers and the crew have been evacuated. As you said, if it's normal, if the pilot realized that he was going to overshoot, and then he then took off, and then circled again for about 10 minutes, according to the other account, and came back to land. Fair enough. I mean, it was one of those incidents, not one, as you said, because it involved Ethiopian Airlines.
Yes.
But we say, everybody's going to die.
In Nigeria, there's a conspiracy behind every incident.
No,
the other human interest story is a lucky Nigerian. His name is Adli Ejike. He was arrested in 2011, November 2011, and he has been in custody for possession of drugs. And actually, a lower court had convicted him. An appeal court too had convicted him, and he was on death row. However, the Supreme Court in Singapore cleared him because the prosecution was not able to prove that he knew about the drugs. Apparently, the drugs has been put in the baggage which he accepted to deliver on behalf of somebody else, and they didn't have any knowledge about the drug. And the embassy, our Nigerian diplomats in Singapore, is advising that Nigerians should be very careful not to take baggages they didn't pack by themselves. So he escaped the hunger's noose just by the skin of his teeth.
Yeah. Yes. That's right. Well, congratulations to him, and the fact that he's also got justice now. Once he's released, let him come back home and then face his regular business, although that's been out of commission now, obviously, for more than 7-8 years. Well, let's take our editorial this morning for review, and it's coming from the Punch newspaper, and it's at page 22. The Punch editorial says, economy needs shot in the arm.
Well, who is the doctor who is to prescribe it to give the economy the shot in the arm? According to the editorial, the economy in Nigeria needs the shot in the arm because we just exited recession 2 years ago, and the economy, particularly ours that is predominantly depending on oil, if we continue that way, we are now at the brink of another one because there's a potential danger of worldwide crisis. And they are alluding to what happened in to the world oil crisis that led to the crisis some years back. And that was a prelude to the recession that the nation went to in some couple of 2 years ago. And so the editorial is advising that the central bank governor, who also warned about this global crisis, should also do a lot of more in giving the economy some shot in the arm. They need to say that more needs to be done to make the environment conducive for foreign direct investors. And the possible threat to that now is the heightened nature of insecurity. And the editorial is drawing attention to the fact that from the stock exchange, investment worth about 166 billion have already left the country. And so they are advising that if we must be able to prepare ourselves for the eventuality, as we did some time ago, we need to diversify our economy, continue the path on agriculture, which is the biggest employer, and above all, to hinge the economy away from oil. They are also advocating strongly that efforts should be made to repair our refineries, and we should begin to refine our products rather than exporting crude and importing petrol.
Bayo, thank you very much for being around.
Thank you.
See you again tomorrow. Okay, it's Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll be dealing with expectations from President Buhari's second term in office.
Thanks for staying, and if you're just joining us, this is Good Morning Nigeria, and we are looking at expectations from President Muhammadu Buhari's next term in office and the next level. Let's begin with an excerpt of the part 1 of the expectations from President Buhari's next level.
think that we're getting to the point where the courts, the judiciary, the executive will be on the same page in order that matters of law enforcement, trial of cases, anti-corruption and all of that will proceed more speedily. If, as a general objective, that the government, President Buhari leads an executive arm of government which considers corruption as an enemy of the nation. So if you have a judiciary that says corruption is an enemy of the nation, so you have them going together, the objective becomes the same.
In the area of power, we expect something better than what we're having now. That is not the fault of this administration. It was the way and manner it was privatized. And one of the lessons learned, just as one of the politicians has said, is to look at that power sector critically, because that is one area that touches the heart of poverty in Nigeria. The hairdresser, the welder, the saloonist and so on, all these people need energy and they cannot afford to buy a generator. The cost of diesel is very high. So once power is solved, we think a lot of progress will be made and poverty will be eradicated. We expect if the National Assembly this time around will cooperate with the President to have a special court for corruption cases, so that it doesn't go through the regular courts. Then we'll have a fast processing corruption cases, and it's going to impact well on the people. We thank the President too for this area in which funding now goes directly to the local government.
What we need to do is to make sure that we direct the powers of the Nigerian state towards the welfare of the citizens. And as far as the human development agencies are concerned, we need to be asking relevant questions. How many of our children are enrolled in school? How many teachers do they have? Do they have enough classrooms? Do they have enough supplies in the class? When the children fall ill, do they have enough healthcare personnel to take care of them? Our pregnant women who are in process of being delivered of babies, do they have enough hands to oversee that process? And so on and so forth. How well fed is the Nigerian? It may appear a kind of pedestrian issue, but these are issues that actually impinge directly on the welfare of the citizens.
The right thing to do, this is what voters should be doing now, to tell those in control of government at the state level that, look, the time has come when they have to perform their duties properly and for the benefit of the citizens, along the line which our colleague in Benin said. They are the ones in charge of all these basic developmental projects that we're talking about. Federal government is largely about framework, foreign defense. This is improperly in a proper federal system. These are the things that should be focused on. But things about healthcare, primary school, secondary school, health, primary health services, these are all services that should be dispensed by state and local governments.
Now that sets the tone for the second part of the discussion, and joining us in the studio is Professor Osareme Osumbo, former governor of Edo State. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, it's my pleasure.
And here with us in the studio is Ambassador Joe Keshi, former Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It's a pleasure to have you join us.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
All right, and then two other guests with us here in the studios. There are four guests, by the way, are regular on Good Morning Nigeria. Dr. Otive Igbuzo, who is the founding executive director of African Center for Leadership and Development. Dr. Igbuzo, pleasure to have you with us on the program.
It's my pleasure to be here.
We also have with us Dr. Abdurrahman Abu Hamiso, is a researcher and public affairs analyst. Abu Hamiso, pleasure to have you with us on the program.
Pleasure, so much. Good morning, Nigerians.
Okay, and of course, the excerpts of the conversation that we had yesterday, you saw that as part of our background, just a condensation of the various issues that the guests raised in the course of that conversation that lasted well over 70 minutes yesterday. We have our new set of guests, and they will be taking it from their perspectives. But to start the ball rolling for today's conversation, President Buhari's second term is 2 days old by today. Yesterday was the inauguration. What were your takeaways from the inauguration ceremonies yesterday in terms of either body language or signaling? Let's begin with Ambassador Joe Keshi.
Thank you very much, and thanks again for having me here. I think, as should be expected with every inauguration, the president's pronouncements and body language, was, in my view, in the right direction, promises, to to address some of their challenges, facing the country. And my expectation, and I believe the rest of Nigerians, is that the president, fully aware of the security, economic situation in this country, especially, would actually move, let me say, with military precision, and begin to address these issues. Because if you look at the situation in the country, if you look at all the comments by people, we actually need some very quick actions to, number one, pull back the economy. So because if you have a situation where 80% of your population are within the poverty level, if you have a situation where the whole of the country is insecure, you're actually in serious trouble. And the administration should move very quickly. And I'm glad to see, for example, that there was not so much high celebration, which is good. And it gives us some serious of, I believe it just demonstrates that the administration realizes that there's actually nothing to celebrate because you are coming back to office. But that this is a time to work, to begin to address some of the serious challenges facing the nation.
Thank you. Professor Sumbo.
Well, as to what impression came out of the inauguration activities yesterday, I will say that what I perceived was a reaffirmation of what Mr. President has been saying over and over again. During the period of the campaign, the party and Mr. President came up with this slogan of moving Nigeria to the next level. And I believe a day or two before the inauguration, he granted an interview which was widely broadcast where he repeated these key elements of his administration. And I was privileged to attend the dinner yesterday evening, and the Vice President also emphasized the need and the commitment to take Nigeria to the next level. What does this really mean? Again, they have, over the time, explained what they mean by taking Nigeria to the next level. Ambassador mentioned the issue of economy, and I think that is very central. The president has continued to emphasize three key things: the economy, anti-corruption, and security. And really, these three must be tackled with all the seriousness that can be deployed towards achieving them. Other aspects of governance are, of course, critical and important. They are important, whether it's health, education, and so forth and so on. Sports, they are important. But unless you get it right with these three areas, security, anti-corruption, and economy, we will never be able to succeed. And as I said, there's no doubt. I don't think any Nigerian has any doubt, anybody has any doubt that the government is committed to these three things, essentially. And I would look forward to seeing the government address these issues with speed, with greater commitment, with greater energy than we witnessed during the first 4 years. Of course, the first 4 years, one would say, even though they were not saying it, it was a learning process. You cannot deny the fact that when somebody is coming to office, when you are starting something new, there has to be a learning process. Let's say that the achievements of the first 4 years may have been limited by the fact that the people were coming into government very fresh. Even the party, APC, was just barely 1 year old before they were given the responsibility, the mandate to handle the affairs of our country, Nigeria. So I believe that in these next 4 years, we will see government firing from all cylinders in order to address these issues speedily. So maybe I hope subsequently I will have time to elaborate on these issues of anti-corruption, security, and economy.
The conversation is just starting.
Thank you.
It's your opening
It's just eating up. Dr. TV, what's your opening comments?
Thank you very much. I think that, at the inauguration yesterday, the president did not give any speech. So we can only infer from statements after the elections and actions after the election about the likely direction of the second term. I think one important thing that has been done is that the president set up a committee to audit the plans, policies, and budget for the past 4 years, which underscores what His Excellency has said, the need to learn. I think one of the, realities all over the world is that any party that has been in opposition for many years, their first tenure is usually a learning process. And if you step back a little and look at the first tenure in those 3 key areas, whether anti-corruption, economy, or security, you will see some positive things that have been done, but also major failings. For instance, in the anti-corruption war, the president has set the tone at the top, which is important for any anti-corruption fight. The country has adopted an anti-corruption strategy, but I doubt how, we can say that there is ownership of that strategy by Nigerians, that the media know what it says, the general citizens know what the strategy is. And historically, there has been too much emphasis on sanctions in terms of anti-corruption fight, without looking at the system and society. And if you look at the anti-corruption strategy, it clearly looks at issues of sanction, system, and society. So expectation is that the second tenure, that the implementation will be rolled out. If you look at the question of economy, immediately after a few months, the countries slip into recession. And within 3 quarters, the country was able to also come out of recession. But there are lingering economic challenges. Positive things like the foreign exchange reserve increased from 20-something billion dollars up to over $40 billion. But if you look at even the budgetary process, there were some level of improvement. For instance, improving the capital expenditure from 16.1% in 2015 to 31.1% in 2018. But unfortunately, this budget that was just signed, it has decreased again to 26%. And in terms of opening up of the budget process, you can see the budget on the website. There are processes for citizens to engage with the budget. But there are still huge challenges with the budget. If you go into the security, Boko Haram has been degraded, but there is still a lot of security challenges, kidnapping, banditry, and attack of soft targets, and new security issues. So my take is that, yes, the celebration was low-keyed. The statements by the president indicated that, in fact, he said people were saying was go slow in first tenure. He's not going to move fast. We are looking forward expectantly to see the positive aspects of all those pronouncements.
All right, Dr. Otiwe Buzo, thank you very much. Abu Hamisu, let's have your take. What signaling did you get from the inauguration activities yesterday?
Well, first of all, I want to say that Mr. President has always been a very prudent person. As a person, he's a very disciplined person, prudent and easygoing. One of the things I like about the inauguration was the fact that it was not too elaborate. You know, in Nigeria, when you have elaborate scheme, you know, just like the bogus car we have, it will gulp a lot of diesel. So in this case, when you have elaborate celebrations in Nigeria, you know amount of wealth that has been squandered to put that together. So it is part of what we're looking at in governance to reduce those costs that will not impact the lives of the people. So for me, it's the right step in the right direction. The second thing for me would be that as a government that has spent 4 years in power, they should have learned a lot of lessons, what has worked, what has not worked, what needed to be changed, and those should guide the direction of governance and the kind of persons that Mr. President will assemble to assist to drive governance going forward. Without lesson learned, without interrogating what has been done right, what worked and what did not work, I bet you there will be no result. It will be more or less like moving in the same cycle, and there will be no change. So the next level, as it is conceived, simply means that we are moving away from where we were. Maybe where we were was not desirable enough, and we're supposed to move to the next level. So without lesson learned as a compass, the next level will just be a slogan. So for me, I want to see the government guided by lessons learned, what needed to be done, what has been achieved. What has been achieved is a credit that has gone to them. What needed to be done is what we are looking for. So for me, the direction is clear. The three key areas Mr. President has mentioned: anti-corruption, economy, and security. And if you look at it critically, there is there are a lot of linkages, both backward and forward linkages, connecting all of these three together. So for me, importantly, the government should be guided by lessons learned in the last 4 years.
Yeah, well, when you say lessons learned, which of course is significant, everybody's talked about the fact that almost invariably the first 4 years amounted to a learning curve for the new administration. Now, the administration would have imbibed its own lessons. Us as citizens would have said, oh, these were some of the things that worked, and therefore you can further leverage on them, or some of the issues in terms of strategy that didn't quite work, abandon them. Ambassador Joe Keshi, in your opinion, what are some of the lessons that you can point out and say, look, these are things that ought to have emerged from the first 4 years of the administration to serve as a guidepost for the next 4?
First, allow me to disagree with my two colleagues on the experience of the actors in government. The president, for example, was a former governor, and he was a former head of state. The cabinet constituted a former, I don't know whether it's still there, constituted some state governors who were state chief executives in their states, and they managed the economy, they managed the security of the state. So if you bring them over to the federal system, it's expected that they came to power experienced, knowledgeable, and have a clear-cut idea of what to do. Secondly, as opposition, they campaigned on what they want to do. One of the governors then told us that in 6 months' time they will resolve the power situation. Let's not forget that. I want to believe that it was based on their understanding that they could. You know, but having said that, the best experience one could take away from the last 4 years, and what they had to understand, is that there's the need to rejig all the policies. In fact, the major problem everybody admits is in the implementation of the policies. The policies might not be totally correct, but at least within the policies, if you decide to implement these policies as designed, a lot will be achieved. So when you say to me that, oh, the foreign exchange has moved to 40-something, no, this is the only country I know where we make so much noise about our foreign exchange going up.
The foreign reserves.
Foreign reserves going up. No, we did practically nothing, just sell oil and put the money in the bank. So that's not really part of an achievement as far as I'm concerned. The major thing is getting the economy to work for the people. The major thing is addressing the security issues of this country. And when I talk of the security, I come back to looking at the situation in the military. And this is simply because I worked with the military in places like Sierra Leone and Liberia. The same problem the military in this country has today in addressing the security challenges, particularly in the Boko Haram area, was the same problem they experienced in these countries. So it means, and by the way, the same problem they had before the Civil War. So it means anytime there's a serious problem in this country, the military is unprepared, they have no arms, they have no kitties, they have just everything is not available. And yet every year the military gets chunk amount from the budget to keep the military strong for the defense of the nation. So we really need to take a very close look at some of these things to see how do you build strong institutions that will enable the people charged with executing government policies to do the right thing. And for me, it's just a question of doing the right thing and ensuring that the rules are obeyed, the policies are properly implemented, and where government fails to implement its own policy, there's nowhere you can talk of success. But again, I go back to say, we must begin to look critically at the situation in the country. We've moved in terms of the index to becoming one of the poorest nations in the world. We have serious security problems. It's difficult to travel on most of the roads. The police, I hear the IG is interested in reforming the police. Yes, the police needs to be reformed. We need leadership at all levels of the police force. Not just, we focus on the IG in this country, but we should also begin to focus on the commissioners that, as well as we should also begin to focus on the state governors. I have repeatedly argued that if the states don't work, this nation is not going to be as strong as we expect it to be.
Still staying with you, Ambassador Keshi.
I'm just, Juma, let's move on now. Sorry, just from Ambassador Keshi. Let's come to Professor Osumbo. Professor Osumbo, in terms of lessons learned over the last 4 years, it's been a lesson called you're Professor of Law. So what is your take-off of those lessons that should therefore guide the next level?
Well, first of all, virtually every Nigerian will say that we need good governance. We need things to change. We need good leaders and good governance. But even if you have the most upright person on earth as a president of Nigeria or any other country, and you do not have a good team working with him, good institutions available for him to work with, good implementation to back the policies and the laws that are in place, he will not succeed, no matter how upright that single individual is. So it is the institution itself. And let me say that even Mr. President himself said that he is learning the democratic process. There are things which he could do as a military head of state, which he cannot do now. Talking again about the need to go through a learning process. Mr. President himself has said that. Because if he had brought to bear his experience as a military head of state, then people will say, he is a dictator. So there's no doubt at all that we have to learn the process under a democratic dispensation, which was different from what obtained in the past. As to what we should be doing, Dr. Otivi mentioned the issue of anti-corruption and what we should be doing. Because the implementation of the anti-corruption policy or programs hinge on implementation of the EFCC Act, the ICPC Act, and the Code of Conduct Act, to take that example from the law enforcement point of view. Those make provision for prohibition of corruption, of financial crimes, investigation, detection, prosecution, and conviction for those offenses. As he said, let's move away from punishment. You are just looking at catching somebody and punishing him. Why don't we now look at prevention? Why don't we set mechanisms and machinery in process to ensure that the corruption does not take place in the first place? That the financial crime does not occur in the first place. And if that happens, the EFCC will have less work to do, ICPC will have less work to do. We will be committing less resources into the anti-corruption fight if we institute certain good governance systems, anti-bribery, anti-corruption systems to ensure that ab initio, the corruption, the financial crimes do not happen at all. That is the kind of thing I want to see us doing, not continuing to emphasize punishment of offenders, but prevention of the commission of crimes through strong institutions and systems of governance. It is very serious to do this because I spoke earlier about the interrelationship, interconnection between all these things. Recently, I was reading about the drop in FDI, foreign direct investments in Nigeria, and the fact that this is attributable, that is foreigners bringing money to invest in Nigeria, has dropped from a high of about 7 billion annually, 5 billion to about 2 billion in the last 2 years or so. Part of the reason is not because of government policy ab initio, that foreigners, people would like to blame government, but business, intelligence, analysts, financial experts from the developing countries, when they x-ray the situation in Nigeria, place the blame on corruption, place the blame on disputes from investments, and less on government policies. Part of the problem that Nigerians need to understand now is that the world has become a global village. And in the developed countries where the FDI flow from, the predominant ones into Nigeria, they have laws which have extraterritorial effect. By this I mean, for instance, if a US investor bribes any official in Nigeria, he is not only punishable. Ordinarily, as you know, offenses can be tried in places, in jurisdictions where they happen. But if an American investor commits an offense here, it's not only punishable in Nigeria, when he gets back home, he will be punished. And I'm aware of cases of some foreigners who have decided to move out of Nigeria in order not to expose themselves to punishment back home. Not just, they may get away with it in Nigeria, but they will not get away with it in their home countries. So this is impacting significantly on the willingness of foreign investors to come in here. So any effort made by the Nigerian government to tackle corruption is going to influence increase in foreign direct investment flow into Nigeria. Then the issue of security is related to this, because if the environment is not secure, investors won't feel safe to go into the place. And then I mentioned the issue of disputes. We need Nigerian business people also need to raise the ethics. You mentioned tone at the top. There has to be an indication of honesty, sincerity, good business ethics by business professionals. Foreigners, maybe some of you, some Nigerians, even the viewers may have heard of situations where foreign investors come and some disputes are orchestrated in order to squeeze them out of the investments. They take their stories back home, and those of them, there are people who hear this, will be very reluctant to come into the Nigerian environment. So these are some of the things that it's easy to blame government. Government has not done this, government has not done that, but there are things that Nigerians themselves are doing to affect the success story that we ought to be telling as a nation.
Talking about Nigerians, just after the March elections, Nigerians themselves started setting the agenda for the government as they come in. And top on the list is the economy. And we read in the editorial today that said, you know, the economy needs a shot in the arm. What's your take on that, Dr. Octavie?
Well, for the past 4 years, there has been a lot of lessons that have been learned. And You know, part of the argument that Ambassador has advanced actually underscores the need for these lessons. One great lesson is that things are easier said than done. You know, people who made, if you look at everything, there was a project called Buhari meter, which was used to measure all the promises that has been made. And so if people said, look, in 6 months, we will provide power, and in 4 years they are struggling, it's a great lesson, in my view. And also the lesson is also that, look, the fact that somebody has been a governor before does not make automatically become a great performer. All these are lessons that should inform what will happen going forward. If you, in regard to the question, if you look at the economy, over the years, we've argued that what Nigeria needed was diversification of the economy. But what is the concrete thing that various governments have done to diversify the economy? In the last 4 years, we've seen some indications of what is possible from what has happened in the solid minerals. In just 1 year, the revenue for the solid mineral increased to about 500%, which is phenomenal. If that can be maintained. We see agriculture, what has been done. And, you know, one of the things that we have also learned, which, you know, is that what needs to be done is known. Now, if you talk about economy, and, you know, there are many indices that people use, GDP growth rate, but all of those things are useless to the citizens if it does not translate to improvement in the standard of living. But today, and I think that is the point, today in every sector, whether economy, whether politics, whether infrastructure, whether education or health, what needs to be done is known. In the Nigerian case, in the case of the question you asked in terms of economy, we need diversification. And what needs to be done in diversification is known. You focus on other sectors like solid minerals, agriculture, manufacturing, and, you know, industrialization. And if you look across the world, what needs to be done in all of this is also known. Secondly, is to ensure that as your economy is growing, there is inclusive growth. Growth whose benefit can be shared across board. And like Ambassador Joe mentioned, if in your country, the majority of the citizens are living below poverty line, policy science has developed to the extent that if you formulate a policy, you can calculate, even before implementation, which sections of the society, which classes of the society will benefit from the policy. So I've always argued that the talk about the fact that there are good policies, the problem is implementation, is wrong. We have many bad policies in Nigeria. Let me give you an example. Housing policy. Before this administration, what was the housing policy? It was called public-private partnership. What does it mean in reality? According to the land belongs to government. And so in the FCT where we are, for instance, what does it mean? It means that if you need land, you go to the FCT minister. If you are a developer, you go to the FCT minister, they give you acres of land. And what do you do as a developer? You divide it into plots and sell it for 8 million naira, 10 million naira, 15 million naira. So how will we meet the 20 million housing deficit that we have? How will poor people be able to have houses? That's why today you see there are many unoccupied estates in Abuja. So the policy is fundamentally wrong. Now, what this administration has done, which is one of the things I actually, really like, is the concept of social housing, where government build houses for the poor. Okay? And if you have, and that's one of the things I've also, one of the things that need to change in terms of the economy is the way our budget is made. We need to change our assessment of performance of budget from amount of money spent to the outcome. So, Ministry of Housing, what is the purpose for Ministry of Housing? Two things. One, to build houses directly for people if the country is implementing social housing, or create an enabling environment for private citizens to build houses. So at the end of the year, this amount has been budgeted to you. How many houses have you built? How many have you enabled to be built? And it run across ministries, departments, and agencies across the country. There are many ministries, departments, and agencies where there is no consideration of the purpose for existence, the mandate of the ministries. So, for the economy, a lot of this needs to be done. Diversification, dealing with the budget to ensure that and dealing with the budget, what do you need to do? A lot of things.
Dr. Tiba, let me pause here. Of course, economic issues matters that we've always taken on Good Morning Nigeria, so we'll have the opportunity of returning to it. But just going back to Abu Hamisu, one other aspect of this, we're talking about expectations of the Buhari administration at the next level, which is the next 4 years. But obviously, the fact that he is perched at the top doesn't mean that there are no other persons or other power centers in the country. Yesterday, we raised the issue of intergovernmental relations. What should be the proper management of intergovernmental relations at the federal level between the executive and the legislature on the one hand, and then the interactions between the federal government and the state governments and local governments? Because if the federal government were working on its own and you are having discordant tunes and voices elsewhere, things might not be exactly the way we expect them to be. What, therefore, will be your expectation in this regard?
Well, I believe that one of the things that this government has done and done right, from my own point of view, though those it affected directly out there crying, is the indication that is already out there that local government allocations will go to local government directly instead of state governors, where we have joint account, and at the end of every month you call the caretaker chairman to your offices and you ask them to sign that there is going to be a program that requires a counterpart funding, and then the money don't go beyond the state capitals. Now, if the federal government is going towards certain direction and the local government cannot key into that direction, state governments are doing things differently, it means that we will dissipate energy doing nothing. And at the end of it all, what matters most is the initiative at the local level. And this issue of autonomy, federating unit, and stuff like that has really given some people this view that they can operate independently as if they are not part of this country. Furthermore, the issue of interest. For instance, if the government is committed to anti-corruption and you have a state legislative house that is legislating against recovery of looted funds, what does that speak to? It shows that that very particular state has not keyed into the anti-corruption war. And whatever we're going to do in Nigeria without anti-corruption, anywhere in the world, honestly, governance becomes problematic. It will be treated to pursuing ends that will not really impact the lives of the people. Therefore, we like to see a situation whereby, for instance, if you take the economic recovery and growth plan, the conception, the analysis, as well as recommendations flowed from one particular understanding that there are vulnerabilities that needed to be addressed, which means there are things that are not being done right that needed to be reversed, and the right things supposed to be done. And from that prognosis, the government has designed as a system that will address some of those issues. First, the first vulnerability that was discovered was, one, issues around infrastructure, roads, movement of goods and services across the nation. And you could see the massive intervention in terms of building of roads, the railway system, now improving power. These are all from the economic recovery and growth plan. Now, if a state government is not keen into this to provide succor for our farmers in terms of building rural feeder roads that will enable that tomato farmers to move their tomatoes from the point of production to the city center, where somebody from, say, Ibadan can drive to Kano, and somebody from Karaye local government that is farming tomatoes, right, will bring that very particular tomatoes to the city center, where the person from Ibadan could buy those tomatoes and transport it back to Ibadan within, say, 5 hours instead of 2 days or 3 days, and then you're taking rotten tomatoes to Ibadan. It means you've not done anything. And the government is not impacting the life of the people. For instance, like the what NISAL is doing, the incentive-based agricultural system that is meant to de-risk agriculture and facilitate agribusiness. It is as a result of the study conducted that shows that the greatest threat to agribusiness were a lot of risks, and that those risks needed to be mitigated. And what are those things that needed to be done? The average farmer don't have access to loan that is repayable and they will make profit. The farmers are not even organized. They don't even have access to input that will generate the needed yield for them to be able to stay afloat. And what did the government do? The government came with this very particular incentive-based agricultural system. And then we started with Anchor Borrowers program to ensure that we conserve the little foreign exchange earnings that we have at that point in time. And today we've moved away from #1 importer of rice to producing rice to the point of self-sufficiency. And one of the indices of this very particular achievement in those states, first, you have somebody, though they are mundane issues, but to the farmers, it's part of their own next level. You have somebody who is married to one wife, is now having 2 wives, and the person is considering the fact that I've moved to the next level. Some have bought cars.
And increasing the country's population.
Population, well, that is another challenge. Then now you are having farmers being organized into what? Into cooperatives. Government can reach them. So if you're talking about government not really doing anything, the farmers will tell you, we are...
Yeah, but how does this connect to the issue of intergovernmental relations?
That is exactly the point. That is the point I'm coming to. Now, the first governor to key into that program was governor of Kebbi State. Now, the president said, this is the policy. How many of you can key into it? What are those things that are required? And before you knew it, first it was Lagos State and Kebbi State coming into agreement to say, produce the rice, we will mill, and then we bag, and we sell. And then the governor led his own people to federal government to say, we're interested, we want to participate. So what I'm saying is the issue of working in our silos in the name of autonomy, in the name of independence, has really dealt a fatal blow to collective aspiration of Nigerians. So where you have a federal government that is interested in anti-corruption, that is interested in economic diversification, and you have a governor that is interested in budgeting and squandering money in the name of security votes, in the name of doing things that do not really connect to the bigger picture that will take Nigeria to the heights that we desire. At the end of it all, the impact will be much, and then federal government will be overburdened. That is what is happening. Federal government is now going to do the job of local government chairman. Federal government is now going to do the job of governors. So in the final analysis, federal government will be lost in the transition because it is neither at the local government, it's neither at the state level, and at the federal level, the whole issue will be overwhelming. So, secondly, coming to the federal level, I think one of the greatest lessons that have been learned is the fact that any governing party needs to manage their own affairs properly. The opposition to APC government came within APC. It was not even PDP. It was from APC. Now you have a National Assembly that is not in tune with what the executive is doing, and then you send budget to your own people that constitute the majority. It takes forever to pass the budget. So whatever has happened, that's why I said, going forward, what we needed to do as a nation must be innovative. We need to innovate. And what does that mean? It means that from lesson learned, what are those things that have been done wrong, and then the results that are there, and what are those things that have been gotten right? For instance, you have other agencies of government where you have key drivers that have reformed those institutions. So what we would like to see will be local government chairmen, based on the new arrangement now, that are taking their own allocation directly, keying into those programs of federal government that will impact the lives of their people. We are not saying they cannot come about their own initiatives that will impact the lives of their people, but keying into those things will ensure that they draw maximum benefit from whatever government is doing at the federal level. State government keying into initiatives that will benefit their people at the federal level. It does not take away the fact that you are the chief executive officer and that you can initiate other policies. Federal government that is playing the role of a father. And that is one thing that the president has been doing that I like so much. Once he's traveling abroad, he brings PDP governors to accompany him. Previously, if you are not a party member, the president will treat you as if you are a pariah. So these are lessons that have been learned.
I'm not sure that's exactly correct. The last point, yes. I mean, Ambassador Keshi was in the diplomatic service. He used to arrange all of this. Jumai?
Yes, and you really understand how
thanks a lot,
Habisu. As the next level kicks off, Nigerians are looking at the shape and character of this government, and some are saying we need continuity so that all these policies that has been implemented can run its full course. Are we going to see new faces or continuity of the government as it is now?
Well, I guess that depends on the president, whether we're going to see, new faces or not. But for me, I think, yes, there's a need for new faces. There's a need to rejig the structure of government, because on paper, and if you've been reading some of the analysis, some of the ministers, they not actually, rise up to the occasion. But the most important thing, at the end of the day, for me, is that the buck ends on the table of the president. And he is responsible and takes, the blame or the commendation on the performance of his appointees. And our expectation this time around, hopefully, should be that, again, he will bring in people who are knowledgeable, people with the experience. But at the end of the day, for me, people who are really prepared to go the extra mile in terms of leadership to get things done. This is the fundamental problem from my perspective, getting things done. Nothing should come to your table and you become lethargic about it and ignore it, and suddenly it evolves into a bigger crisis. If you look at the stories on how some of the security issues in this country started, they were just little things. I think in the other day, at a conference on security, they were given, people from Borno were telling us that this whole crisis started as a misunderstanding between bicycle riders or something like that.
Actually, it was the helmets.
The helmets.
Yes.
If you listen to a study done on Zamfara, you know, these are things that could have been nipped in the bud. Yes. And we would not be in the type of crisis we have now. So leadership plays a significant role. But because I'm focusing on security, let me go back to the question on local government. Let's admit in this country that we do not have a local government. If we do, we need to sit down and begin to, you know, reform the local government. Look, when I served in Atlanta and I received local government officials visiting, you know, my area, the first thing I do is to take them to the city hall. When we get out of the car, I invite everybody to the other side of the road. And I say to them, look at this huge building. This is the office of the mayor of Atlanta. He runs this city, not the governor. Your responsibility is to run your local government. And everybody say, ha, is this, is this the office of the mayor? What do they do inside there? And I said, come. So I take them through to meet the governor. Then we go to various, you know, offices, but also make sure I take them to the guy who runs the security of the city. And I get them to sit down and discuss. It would be interesting to find out how many of these, local governments even have security chiefs that work in conjunction with the police. So the point I'm trying to make is, at the end of the day, we can have all this conversation over and over again, but leadership at all levels is critical to anything being done. He talked of diversification. I think I was in school when I started hearing this issue of diversification. And I said I think a year ago in Port Harcourt, that I sincerely hope that one day my grandson will not also be talking of diversification. So when are we going to diversify? We've been saying this. And again, he was right. Doctor was right. Everything we need to do in terms of diversification is known. It's not a rocket science, but it is the character of the leadership to drive these issues. And I go back to saying, if the local governments don't work, if the states don't work, look, federal government has only 120 secondary schools. A state like Delta probably has over 3,000. So if you are talking of improving education, it has to start from the state level. Federal government does not have land for agriculture. So if you are talking of anything being done in agriculture, it has to start from the states. You can go on and on. Health, the same thing. So if the states don't work, if we don't get the states to work, and the governors are actually not bound to work in tandem with the federal government, but again, it's only harmonious for them to do that for the sake, because it's a federal system. The point is, every sector or every structure of government needs to understand their responsibilities and move to ensure that they fulfill the mandate of what is designed for them to do. For me, sometimes it's a lack of understanding of what you're expected to do. So everybody gets to power and look at the governors celebrating successes today in terms of diversification. Look at the adverts in the newspaper. Auditorium, fine, I don't have a problem with auditorium. Houses for judges, I don't have a problem with that. 10,000 space built by a governor for worship. 10,000 auditorium for worship. Stadium, all these are good. But you know what? You don't see anything on agriculture. So where do you begin to create that environment to industrialize and to build an economy that can employ millions of Nigerians in this country? You don't see the states doing this. And this is why we're in serious trouble.
All right. Ambassador Keshi, thank you very much. Indeed, for the other guests as well. We're taking a short break now. When we return from the break, we'll continue with the conversation. All right. You're welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria, and we're live on the network service. Now, we still have all of our guests with us here. Let's return to the issue of intergovernmental relations. Professor Serimo Osumbo, two-term senator in the Fourth Republic. One of the naughty issues that we have had in 20 years of our democracy has been the often cantankerous relationship between the legislature and the executive. This is at the federal level. We know the problem at the state level, virtually no legislature, because the story is that the governors, of whom you were one, pocket the legislature. But at the federal level, there are issues about the relationship between the executive and the legislature. Some persons applauded that it's healthy for our democracy. Others also say that it's an impediment. Going forward, what would you like to see?
Well, I would obviously like to see a more cordial and harmonious relationship between the two arms of government, the legislature and the executive. Because that way you will be able to get a lot more done. When you are constantly bickering and quarreling and scheming and plotting, your attention is diverted from the core objectives and responsibilities before you. So obviously, I will expect that we will have a new National Assembly that is more focused on its core responsibilities, that plays less of politics, because there was in the outgoing National Assembly, I believe that there was too much of politics being played out at the expense of their core responsibilities. Because in that way, you'll be able to achieve a lot more. The expectations of Nigerians are quite high. And the time is not even enough to be able to meet those expectations. Talk less of wasting valuable time on bickering. Having said that, though, I should also say that the presidential system of government that we operate, even though the concept of separation of powers exists even within the parliamentary system, but it's more pronounced in the presidential system that we operate. That presupposes that the various arms of government will want to assert their independence and authority in order that they are able to serve as checks and balances on the other. This, of course, entails that there will be disagreements. There will be conflicts, there will be tensions. But once you have the interests of the people, the interests of the nation at the back of your mind, not personal political profit or benefit, as it were, but the interests of the people, then we can afford to quarrel or disagree and then agree after disagreeing. This is what also obtains elsewhere. People talk about even fighting. This is not to encourage fighting within the Nigerian legislature, but you see parliaments in other countries where they are also exchanging blows. So this is not peculiar to Nigeria, but we don't want to be an example in that area to the rest of the world. Let me recall that when President Clinton paid a visit to Nigeria and he came to address the joint session of the National Assembly, President Obasanjo was president then, and the relationship was at its lowest ebb during that time between the legislature and the president. And there was a lot of heckling when the Nigerian president was talking, heckling and whistling. When President Clinton took the microphone, he said that what he was seeing is very much like what he's used to back in his own country. Some people said he said that maybe just to douse tension, but there's no, see what is happening even in the U.S. Congress right now, constantly quarreling. So people shouldn't feel unduly alarmed when these things happen, because it's part of politics. They say that there's constant struggle for limited resources, limited opportunities even within the same political party. Already we see contending people competing to become presiding officers, even within the party, and people taking positions. That is the nature of politics. I will want to compare what is happening at the federal level with what obtains at the state level. At the federal level, the issue of oversight, that is the legislature carrying out oversight on the executive, is quite vigorous, whereas at the state level is virtually non-existent. Because the governors, as you say, I didn't pocket the legislature, but that happens most of the time. Then if I may just address the issue of continuity in policies, which she talked about. Yes, I expect that there will be continuity with more vigor, because we had reached a level we must aspire to raise the tone and the bar to the next level. But there are issues, again, with respect to the Constitution in addressing some of the problems that we've talked about. The issue of fiscal federalism. Mr. President, even at the time during the campaign, was telling the Nigerian electorate, don't vote for a governor who is not able to pay salaries. He didn't make any exceptions, even if it is a governor within his own party. Don't pay a governor who is unable to pay salaries and meet minimum obligations. So this should serve as a lesson to the states that they are not living up to expectation. When he came in, he started bailout, giving states bailout. The states had their own resources for paying all these things, but the federal authorities had to come to their rescue. The issue of fiscal federalism is an issue, talking about local government allocation. The Section 7 aspects of the Constitution expects that there will be a state and local government joint account, meaning that the allocations from the federal to the state will be put on the table. 10% of IGRO from the state will be put there, and then it will be disbursed to the local government from there. But that never operated to the best of my knowledge. Rather, what comes from the federal was just, it ended there, and they did whatever they wanted to do at that level. Government has tried to be creative. It will require some constitution amendment to address the shortcomings in Section 7 of the Constitution. But I was quite impressed about the creative approach that the federal authorities have adopted in deciding to pay straight to the local government councils. State governments are saying this is unconstitutional because you should pay into a joint local government account. But my argument, again, trying to be realistic and creative about this, is that, okay, if you want it in a basket, bring your own 10% IGR. Then on paper, it can be disbursed. You don't need to have the cash. Because previously it was easy to get the cash from councils, but now you cannot easily, it can be traced. There will be a trail from the local government accounts to elsewhere. So that needs to be addressed. The issue of fiscal federalism has to be addressed. Whether it is the shortcoming of the state government with respect to employment generation, with security and all this, has a bearing on the amount that is coming from the federal to the state. But the counter-argument is that you cannot increase, you should not be thinking of increasing allocation to the states when they have not been judiciously applying what is coming to them now. But again, we can be creative in amending the Constitution in such a way that they can be held accountable. Talking about security, the issue of community policing or state police comes to bear. If the state governor is to be the chief security officer of the state, then he should have some greater amount of leverage and influence over the commissioner of police in the state. So if we want to maintain one central police force with community policing decentralized at the local government or grassroots level, the governor of the state, as chief security officer, must have a way of being able to influence what, or control, have an input into what is happening in that area. Just taking security as an example.
As an example. Professor Subo, thank you very much. Again, I would say, just skip into another subtopic of what we are discussing. My question is going to both Abu Hamisu and Dr. Tiva Ibuza. There's some commentators, and I'm sure you all get to access commentators on various platforms, including newspapers and elsewhere, have indicated that the nation's mood is something that needs to be taken into consideration. That addressing the security concerns is critical, and also attaining a higher degree of national unity is critical, because all of this will conduce to production, because that will be a predicate. If you have social peace, then you can have that. Are there issues on the sociological, psychological, or even on philosophical level that we need to address on a national platform to say, look, the nation's unity is enhanced, or will be enhanced, and that whatever tensions there are arising from insecurity or other conflicts can be addressed?
Yes, I agree completely that there are national issues that needs to be addressed. And my point of departure is that leadership has to be provided at all levels for this to happen. And for the second term of President Muhammadu Buhari administration, he needs to focus on big issues that have been neglected over the years, including the last 4 years. One of the big issues is a long-term national development plan. For any country that is serious about cohesion, about development, about improvement in the quality of life of its citizens, must have a holistic national development plan. And we need to also, in doing a new development plan, we need to look at the errors of the past. The Vision 2020, for instance, has economic dimension, social dimension, environment dimension, but it does not have political dimension. So the political dimension is very important for every country. President Muhammadu Buhari has tried to redefine politics in some ways by always saying that money should have less influence in politics. He criticized the amount of nomination fees. But as president, you can't just stop at criticism. There are things that can be done. So he needs to have a political reform program that will change the way people look at politics, that will change and that political reform program will have many components, which may include constitutional amendment, to rejig what people are talking about. If you look at it, we focus too much on the mundane in this country. If you look at other presidents, when they speak to philosophies, they speak to way of life, they speak to how things should be done. They speak to mobilize citizens so that they will put their energy. That's what leadership is all about. No government can employ every citizen. No government can give all citizens what they have. But government can create the enabling environment. Enabling environment is not just a question of access to loans, So the president needs to focus on those big issues. There's the need to revisit the question of reorientation and ensure that, because what is happening is that there are changes that are taking place, In those days, we always talk about cooperation, but now what we talk is religious tolerance, to tolerate each other instead of respect for each other's views. So there's a whole lot of, changes that needs to happen. And one major big issue that the second term should also look at is the question of ideas. I've said earlier that in all the sectors, what needs to be done is known. The level of knowledge in the 21st century is so high, but we don't see this knowledge being utilized in government. One scholar put it that those with ideas do not have power, and those with power do not have ideas. And it's recognized all over the world that this is the case. So what people do across the world is that government has think tank. Political parties have think tank. You know, Nigeria is one of the few countries in the world where the government has no think tank, the governing political party has no think tank. Even in the recent past, during President Obasanjo's administration, despite all his imperfection, has the Independent Policy Group, which is the government think tank. The People's Democratic Party, despite all the problems we had with it in 16 years, had the People's Democratic Institute, which is a think tank. So the president must in this, because for me, the greatest thing he will leave is legacy. So he need to look at those big issues. He need to begin to look at what will he do in the first 2 years, and after the last 2 years, he need to begin to look at issues of succession. So because and finally, I think this is important. In terms of continuity, in terms of the next 4 years, he must bring in people with at least 3 qualities: character, competence, and capability. What many governments do across the world, and it has even happened in this country, is not to appoint only the people you know. It's to have a search party, to bring in people into, you have to have some sectors that you are critical about, and you say, I want the best in this sector. And you have people who are close to you who will be able to, not to go and bring their village idiots and family imbeciles, but to look for people who can move the country forward.
Headhunters.
Headhunters, yes.
All right, Tibe Buzo, thank you very much. Abu Hamisu, let's have your thoughts on this same issue.
Well, thank you very much. For me, as I said from the very beginning, there are a lot of things that have worked. There are things that have been done and we did not get the desired result. Going forward, I think Mr. President has really set a precedent in terms of what it takes to govern a country. First is security. The second thing is the economy. The third thing is anti-corruption. And what has been happening all over the world is that between policy formulation and implementation, resources have to move in that direction. And then you have a lot of persons along the line that are siphoning these resources so that they don't get to the intended beneficiaries. And this is why anti-corruption has become critical. The last thing he has added is social investment. And this social investment, especially the area of cash transfer to vulnerable groups to at least assist them to key into education and so on and so forth. What it requires now is this attitude that I have been hinting and then hitting hard on, which is learning lessons from what has happened. So for me, there are sectors that the president got the appointment of those persons right, and those persons brought anti-corruption to those agencies. For instance, what has happened in JAM, for instance, Nigeria Ports Authority. Now, what we needed as a country are those reformers that will be able to assist Mr. President to achieve his vision. And from that, the president, again, needed to do one thing quickly. The attitude of allowing appointees to run the show without intervening at the critical time is something that Mr. President needed to check. If any minister, any appointee is not performing, the next thing is a show for a replacement, and that will rejig the entire process and we'll get the desired result.
Thank you so much, Dr. Abdurrahman Abu Hamisu, researcher and public affairs analyst. Thank you for coming on Good Morning Nigeria. We also thank Professor Sereme Osumbo, former governor of Edo State. Thank you for being on the program.
Thank you.
Ambassador Joe Keshi, former permanent secretary, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
And Dr. Otive Ebuzo, founding executive director, African Center for Leadership and Development. Thank you so much for your contribution on the program. Grizzly?
All right, so that's it for us today on Good Morning Nigeria. I would like to thank you for tuning in. We're back tomorrow, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Until then, do enjoy the rest of your day. My name is Kingsley Sadolo.
And I'm Juma Yusuf. Have a wonderful day.